So for my project, I focused on like a great tragedy, like the Twin Towers falling or the Holocaust. What I notice is that it's usually researched to death. Like they get all the statistics and how it affected the economy, how it affects the general population, but usually they don't focus on the individual. They kind of let that fall aside. They don't watch how it affects the individual and how the pain really affects the mind. There's a loose study on it, but it's not focused on. And so what I chose to do was just that. I chose to try and empathize with the individual and understand what it'd be like to have to live through that. So for the first book I read, it was The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank, which was one extreme of my choices because that was a diary. It was not a fictional story. It was completely word for word what she had to go through every day. And the second book I read was Extremely Loud, Incredibly Close, which was the other end of the spectrum, where it was a fictional story about a boy who didn't even go through the experience, but he had to survive knowing that his father died in it, and he had to see towers which he normally used as stabilizers in the city. Like he would see them and know where he was in town, and they just vanished one day, and he had to go through that. And watching how they both coped with the pain was really interesting. The first thing I noticed was that when the pain happened, they became more temperamental. Like they would react to pain more drastically. So if, say, you stubbed your toe, if you didn't have this going on, if you stubbed your toe, you'd move on, it'd be no big deal. But when you just had the death of a family member, or you've been trapped in secret annex, as Anne was, for a long time, you would be furious that you stubbed your toe, and you wouldn't be able to get over it. You'd spend hours thinking about how much you hate the table, that you stubbed your toe on. And I researched that a little bit, and the reason for that is because when your brain is in stress, it releases three happy receptors, they call. One of them is dopamine, and the other one is serotonin, and then I think neprotonin. I can't remember for sure, but all three have specific effects that help calm the body and help calm the mind and keep you healthy. So when you're in constant mental stress, those three happy receptors are almost completely drained. So it's in order to keep mental health, you focus on problems because your brain tries to get rid of them because it can't handle constantly fighting all the little things. So it tries to solve as many little things as it can to get rid of them and to focus on the bigger problem. And then also, really interesting thing was how in the Diary of Anne Frank, it was a constant struggle from the beginning, and it lasted a long time, like years. So it became harder and harder for her. She started pretty optimistic, and she considered it like a strange vacation in a boarding school, is how she put it, to live in secret annex. And it was almost happy at first, but the longer she had to stay with them, the longer she realized that her friends are dying around her and there's nothing she can do, the more and more it became a challenge to keep her spirits up and to stay positive. For Oscar, though, from Extremely Loud, Incredibly Close, it was a one-time event where he lost his father and he had most of his life stripped away from him. But then he had everyone around him to help him, and he had people who loved him. He didn't have the constant fear of being killed or being harmed. So for him, he started on the opposite end of the spectrum, where he became very cynical very fast, and he would do things called inventing, which is really just his own idea. Like he would invent, say, a pool where all the tears of the city would gather, and you could see how sad the town was by how many tears there were in the pool. But as he went farther and farther away from the event, I should say, because of, and through time, he would become more and more optimistic, or at least realistic, and he needed to invent less and less. His brain didn't need to create an escape for him. He could accept the world for what it was. And then Anne Frank was actually the opposite of that too, where when she wrote, at first it was very realistic. She always complained about what happened around her and everything else, but as she got farther and farther into it, she started becoming pessimistic, and she had to complain and escape herself. She would like talk about how much she loved her old friends, and she would imagine that they're still around, and she would talk about them. And she would create this own little world of joy in her book she called Kitty. Just the effects of tragedy was amazing because I feel like everyone's gone through it a little bit, so you can kind of relate to the characters. I think that's about it.